Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Fantasy Football Fellas Podast. I will be hosting today. My name is Cameron Lawrence. I am joined by my esteemed colleague, Mr. Tyler Plath. Tyler, how are you today on this Tuesday?
You know, I'm good. I'm sorry as I'm adjusting the gain of my microphone. No, I'm doing well. I'm slowly recovering from our little 18-person draft that we had last night, and that was a doozy. And yes, you know, it was a good time. And especially in the format that it's in, it's a brand new league that we're trying out with a whole bunch of our friends. I can say with relatively full confidence my team is going to be out within like the first couple weeks. I panicked, drafted DeAndre Hopkins. In the format, you should not be taking guys that are missing a whole lot of time. You know what, mistakes happen. I'm just glad it's not in a like standard redraft, because that's where we make our money on. So
yeah, for sure. So what Tyler's referring to is we joined a guillotine league put on by one of our buddies. So in a guillotine league, the lowest scoring team every single week is cut, and all their players are dropped to free agency, and every other team gets to pick them up. So it'll be interesting. We'll see how it goes. I went high upside, guys. So I don't know how I feel. I reached on most of my players as well. Reached on DK and Mike Will.
According to the draft board, right?
That's true.
I try to use my rankings to the best of my ability, but at certain points, let's just say the board got the best of me.
Yeah, I reached according to the board a lot because I took Kamara at 3, but that's where I got him in my rankings. So
right, I mean, I was with a couple of people and they were saying Kamara at 3, isn't he suspended? I'm like, no. I mean, no. He's well worth the number 3 spot.
Yes.
So
yes, yeah. And that's the thing. That's what you got to pay attention to. One of the big traps is not falling for the board and trying to game the board a little bit. Oh, I like this guy here, but he could follow me there. So I tried to do that with both Cortland Sutton and David Montgomery, and both were sniped by the same team before I got my pick back. So that was great. That was fantastic. Loved it. Super happy.
And I'm going to say it real quick. Shout out to you, because you know who you are. That is yes. That was sniping Cam all night long.
Exactly who you are, you fool. Well, obviously Lucas is out tonight. College starting back up, and so he's got some events that he's running for the students that he works with. So he is out tonight, but he should be joining us for episode that comes out on Friday. Mm-hmm. But yeah, let's just roll right into news and notes, because we got a jam-packed episode talking about top 10 tight ends, top 10 quarterbacks. So we want to make sure that we give them their time, and we got a lot of news right now with a lot of cuts happening today, some big trades, and just some other news. Kenyan Drake was signed by the Ravens today. We talked about in the last episode that he was cut by the Raiders, and this comes along with some news that there's some uncertainty about JK starting week 1. Tyler, what are you doing with the Baltimore backfield?
I'm avoiding it. I mean, I'm for at least the beginning of the season, because I think what the Kenyan Drake signing kind of signals is that Baltimore is going to like gently ease J.K. Dobbins back into action, right? Mm-hmm. And you know, that sounds good then for Kenyan Drake and Mike Davis. I'm not touching those guys at all. I mean, you would think Kenyan Drake, just because Kenyan Drake has a bigger name, but this soon to the season, who knows just how the workload is going to balance out. So when that's the case, it's just best to just not touch it at all. Maybe it's worth rostering and stashing on the roster, but in terms of week 1 starts and sits, no Baltimore no backfield, a part of the Ravens, should be in your starting lineup.
I 100% agree. The only guy running the ball that should be in your lineup on the Ravens is Lamar Jackson. And
yeah.
We will talk about him later, actually. Next piece of news is another running back situation. Marlon Mack, cut from the Houston Texans. He was a guy that we thought would be challenging Damien Pierce for the RB1 spot, but doesn't look like anymore. Ty, what is the outlook for Damien Pierce now for this upcoming season?
I mean, Damien Pierce should be your first overall pick in your draft for this year. I mean,
I should have known.
yeah, I mean, like, why not? That's horrible advice. Don't listen to that. No, I definitely think Damien Pierce is. I mean, he has been the hot name recently in fantasy drafts. I mean, he's going as what, RB27 now on Underdog.
Yeah,
which is very, very crazy. But at the same time, I can kind of understand it, right? You're getting an RB1 outside of the top 25. It makes sense, right? We'll see just how much, or how well this all works out for Damien Pierce. I mean, you're going up against second team defenses in the preseason, and we'll just say that Houston is not the most ideal scenario. So he's not someone to reach on at this point, but there is a bunch of upside just because RB1 in an offense that needs to run the ball more efficiently.
Yeah, definitely. I just don't see the upside there for Dameon Pierce because he's not going to get touchdowns. They're just a team that's not going to score a ton of touchdowns. And so maybe if he's getting a ton of receiving work, but I don't feel like that's quite in the cards for him either. So running back 27 probably feels about right. It feels high to me, but it probably is right with the way everything's working out.
I mean, you can probably expect 5-6 touchdowns, and that's good enough for like low 20s.
Yeah, definitely. Quick note too, Jalen Waddle hasn't been practicing the last couple days. It's just something undisclosed, so just something to monitor as you get closer to the season. I don't know if I'd let it affect my draft stock right now because it seems relatively new. It doesn't seem like it's an injury. But I'm not taking Jalen Waddle in a ton of drafts anyways.
Right.
So there's, that's probably why it doesn't affect me because I don't feel like I have Jalen Waddle everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, we've got him outside of our top 25, I think, right?
I think just top 20. I think he just misses top 20.
Okay, so he's currently going off the board like 16, 17, 18 range. That's rich for us.
Mm-hmm.
Not saying that he doesn't have talent to finish top 20, but just the situation scares us a little bit. The thing is, with the injury now on top of such a high ADP, according to us, like this, I'm assuming this pushes you and I both a little more out on Waddle come time for drafting and stuff.
Yeah. Next piece of news and notes is Jimmy G restructured his deal to stay in San Francisco. There was some news that Seattle was interested, maybe some other teams, but that is squashed. It doesn't really affect any teams as of right now, but if you had any hope of Jimmy G taking over for Geno Smith, then that is squashed.
Yeah, I mean, I think Jimmy realized, like, I should just rehab here.
Yeah.
Instead of trying to rush back into playing rehab, take a smaller deal now, and hopefully then next offseason when teams are looking for another quarterback, right? Like another Mitch Trubisky situation, right? I'm picturing Atlanta, right? Where Marcus Mariota signed a 2-year deal. We'll see how that goes. Desmond Ridder, if he plays at all this year and it doesn't work out, well, then you're looking for another quarterback, something like that, right? So, yeah, I can understand it a little bit. It feels weird, though, having a former starting quarterback in the locker room still as the backup. It just feels a little weird.
Yeah, on the San Francisco side, though, it makes sense. Mobile quarterbacks don't have the best track record of always staying healthy. So you have a guy like Jimmy G, who you've been to the Super Bowl with as your backup. It's hard to beat that. Laviska Shenault was traded to the Carolina Panthers. Ty, is there any new fantasy value for Visca now, or are you still avoiding?
If I'm, late round just throwing, darts just at anyone, Laviska's definitely up there. He just kind of fell out of luck, I'll say, in Jacksonville, just because there was a coach last year that just could not make up his mind about a whole lot. So, no, I remember when the trade happened, I immediately sent it to you and Lucas, and I'm like, hot take, he's now the wide receiver 2 in this offense. I don't know if you can necessarily say outright that he's wide receiver 2. But again, late rounds, he's worth a pick, but he's not someone to reach on. There's no guarantee in production just with Carolina in general, besides Christian McCaffrey.
Yep.
That's besides that. So
quick question. Wan'Dale Robinson or Visca?
Oh, yikes.
2 gadget players on not 2 great teams with kind of crowded offenses. That's why I figured I'd ask.
Right. Yeah, I totally get why you asked. I lean a little more towards Wan'Dale.
Okay.
And I'll explain this quick. Kenny Galladay looks like he just does not give 2 rips about this year at all. Kadarius Toney currently battling something, so that to me screams like, or tells me that like Wan'Dale could have an opportunity at some sort of playing time this year compared to Laviska. You have no idea if he's going to play at all. So
100%. Next news, Alexander Madison's name has been kind of out there in trade rumors. Just real quick, you can give 10-second explanation on it. What is one destination that you think he could end up at, and do you think there's fantasy value for him there?
Philadelphia.
Okay.
And if that happens, he then becomes kind of like a low end running back 2, in my opinion.
Really?
Because I think Madison is someone that you can give a workload to, right? Minnesota feels comfortable doing it when Dalvin Cook is out, right?
Yeah.
I know that they use a committee approach, but I would not be surprised if Madison is like the early down back and then Kenny Gainwell is then the receiving back. But then they mix in some receiving work for Madison because he can catch out of the backfield. So Philly comes to mind right away. I honestly was kind of surprised that like Baltimore didn't throw something out there. Just I know that the capital that Minnesota's asking for is a little higher than probably some teams would like to pay. Mm-hmm. But like a J.K. Dobbins, Alexander Madison tandem seems like
pretty solid.
Right. So I mean, I think there are plenty of teams that are interested. I mean, what was it? 12 teams that were interested or called at least. So there are opportunities, but I really doubt that Madison is traded at all, honestly.
Yeah, that's the thing. I think Minnesota knows how valuable he is, and so for a team to kind of give up what they would need for it to be worth it for them, I don't know if that's going to happen. And then the last thing we'll mention is just really sad news. Brian Robinson was involved in a carjacking, was shot multiple times. So he's probably, I'd be probably pretty surprised if he plays again this year. But you never know. They haven't released many details, and obviously these guys are people. So
yeah,
if I'm getting shot, I'm going to be honest, I'm taking the whole season off. So if he comes back, if he comes back, then that's amazing. It's just you're not expecting anything from him at this point. I mean, that's something pretty serious.
No, and I think people that are still saying like, oh, he's definitely worth a draft pick are the people that are just really holding out hope and not really understanding the situation. I think at the end of the day, all 3 of us fellas, I should say, are on the boat of get well soon.
Yes.
Take your time. There is no need to rush back. You have such a long career ahead of you. Take whatever 100%. Time you need.
100%. Yep. So we will transition from that to our quarterbacks naturally. And I think we go 10-1 again. Last time we went 1-10, or we went down. So I you know what? We'll go 1 down. I think this time we'll start at the top and we'll go down because then we can end with our honorable mentions. Because I think that's where the discussion comes in, right? People know who's at the top of the quarterback list. It's once you get further down is where you kind of want to expound on that conversation about these guys. So our number 1 guy is Josh Allen, and I don't think that's going to be debatable at all. He should be. He's been back to back. He's a guy who can rush for 700 yards and throw 40 touchdowns. There's not much to argue with there. We all miss quarterback one. He started off slow. Weeks 1 through 6 was only the quarterback 2, and then finished weeks 8 through 18 as a quarterback 1. So, I mean, never averaging below 23 fantasy points a game. I mean, it's just ridiculous what this guy can do, and he's proven that he's consistent on an amazing offense. So,
enough said.
Number 2 is where we really start to shake things up with Justin Herbert. Again,
no one could have guessed that one.
No, he finished the quarterback 2 last season. And he's our consensus quarterback 2. We all have him there. He's in an offense with a coach that's going to throw the ball a ton. We talked about him a lot because we love Mike Williams. We love Keenan Allen. We love Austin Eckler. And it's because they're connected to this guy. I said it last time, and if I was going to bet on any quarterback in the NFL this year to throw 50 touchdowns, I would bet on Justin Herbert. I'm not saying he's going to throw, but if I had to pick one, it would be Herbert. Ty, looking at Herbert, how realistic do you think that it is that he ends up as quarterback 1?
Oh, man. I mean, it's hard to beat 40 touchdowns and 700 rushing yards from Josh Allen.
Yes.
You'd never really want to bank on injuries being the reason, but like if let's say like Stephon Diggs goes down, right? Like a weapon for Josh Allen or Josh Allen himself like misses a game or two, then Herbert kind of takes over. But I think Herbert's firmly in at 2.
Yes. And well, I think this is a discussion worth having. We both all 3 of us love Herbert and Josh Allen. We are not drafting him in redraft leagues. Unless we're in a league where people understand not to take quarterbacks early, because we're not paying a second round price tag for Josh Allen. I'm not taking Josh Allen over a Mike Evans, over a Saquon Barkley. And Justin Herbert kind of starts to get interesting as he falls towards the end of the 4th. If he made it into the 5th, then yes. But for a 4th round pick, it's really, really hard to go, yes, I want to get a quarterback early, no matter how good they are. And I think we'll kind of explain more with these next guys coming up, and you see in the later rounds, there is not much separating these top tier guys from the kind of 10 through 6 kind of guys that are going in the 7th, 8th round. I mean, there definitely is, but not for the price tag you're paying.
Right. I mean, it's only like 2, 3, 4 points a game, which like honestly, like at that's just spare change at that point. That's what it is.
Yes, 100%. So as we move to 3, we actually keep it in unison. We all have Kyler Murray as our quarterback 3. Last season, he was quarterback 5, and he missed weeks 9 through 11. Ty.
Oh, wait a second. I think he was QB 10. That I missed. My bad. He was QB 10 because, those 3 weeks can add up pretty quick.
Yep. So he's QB 10. Still had a good season, though. Weeks 1 through 8, he was QB 6. Weeks 13 through 18, he was QB 6. So averaging 21 to 23 points a game in both those stretches. Ty, the thing that scares us is there's no DeAndre Hopkins weeks 1 through 6. How does that affect Kyler Murray in your eyes?
I don't really think it does, honestly. I mean, the team traded for Marquise Brown. Zach Ertz is coming back. Rondale Moore is supposed to be taking on a bigger role. Like, there is no shortage of weapons. And I know DeAndre Hopkins himself is a weapon, but again, this team still has plenty of opportunity to produce on the offensive end where they will find themselves in shootouts. I mean, that's how Arizona is going to play this season. They are banking on the offense to win them games in shootouts. So I really, if anything, like Hopkins only helps out when he comes back. There's really no, dip in production without him, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. If anything, he's just going to get that much better when D-Hop comes back because it's going to open up the field that much more. Kyler's another one of these guys, though, and we'll kind of see this pattern building up, that he can rush for 700-800 yards. He can throw 35 touchdowns, and he can have a week where he throws 1 touchdown, gets you 200 passing yards, but he runs it for 60 yards and a touchdown, and all of a sudden, it kind of balances out. He's one of these guys with a super safe floor. And that's the same with this next guy, Mr. Lamar Jackson. Last season was obviously disappointing with the injury. but we saw a different Lamar last year. Ty, do you want to touch on that a little bit? Just the difference that we saw in Lamar's production from years prior.
Yeah, I mean, what year was that he won MVP? Was that
2019.
2019?
Yep.
2020, he missed some time towards the end of the season again, and I'm trying to remember if that was, I'm pretty sure that was injury. Like that
Yes.
that was
Yep.
not just a lack of production or anything. And last year he battled injuries too. And I don't think anyone's ready to kind of put the injury prone label on him, but I think the biggest appeal for this year at least is that it's a contract year pretty much for him, right? And if Lamar Jackson is wanting to be paid like he has been wanting to, the man will come through. If and that's, I mean, let's put the asterisk on it. If he stays on the field, right? You know what you get. You get massive rushing upside. You get a guy who has gradually gotten more and more. Oh my goodness, who has gotten more and more comfortable throwing the ball lately. And now this offense is kind of shifting back to the strength of the run game, which is where he, won his MVP was because of the rushing game. So I know it can scare a little bit. It can scare people a little bit just based off of the fact that he hasn't really stayed healthy. But you know what you're getting with Lamar Jackson, and you're getting a cheat code. You're getting a cheat code. Let's just call it as it is.
Yeah. He might be the only quarterback that could rush for 1,000 yards again this season. Last year, we saw the Ravens throw more than half the teams in the NFL. But like you were saying, a lot of that reason is because they didn't have a rushing game. They didn't have J.K. Dobbins. They didn't have Gus Edwards. They had Le'Veon Bell. They had Latavius Murray. They had Devonta Freeman. It was just not a good running game. So now that the running game is going to be kind of coming back, like you said, they're going to lean back into his strengths. So we know he can air it out, but we also know that he's going to be able to run the ball more and be more efficient doing so. Moving on to number 5, we have Patrick Mahomes, which feels weird to say that he's all the way down at quarterback 5. However, he finished at quarterback 4 this year and probably had the second biggest loss out of any quarterback this offseason, losing Tyreek Hill. I'll reserve the biggest loss for Aaron Rodgers losing Devontae Adams. But Ty, what are your expectations this year for Patrick Mahomes without Tyreek Hill?
Ooh, I'm expecting less. All right, maybe the best way to put it, I'm expecting more balls thrown around the line of scrimmage, more than downfield that we saw with guys like Tyreek Hill. Not to say that this team's can't turn 5-yard passes into 30-yard gains, because they definitely still can. I'm just expecting a very different offense for Kansas City this year, and we know the talent that Mahomes has with his arm. He has arguably the best arm in the NFL.
Yes.
So you lose you lose a guy like Tyreek Hill, but again, like, you're still a top 3 quarterback in the league. You're in an Andy Reid system. Like, top 3 seems a little bit of a stretch for fantasy, but he can't be any lower than 5 or 6, just because you know the talent of Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah. Yep. Me and you both have him at 5. Lucas has him at 6. I forgot to read off Lamar's. Me and you both have him at 4, and Lucas had him at 5. And before we talk about the guy that Lucas had at 4, I just want to add, Patrick Mahomes is special, right? And as the price tag continues to fall, I still think it's a little steep for me to take Patrick Mahomes, because he's going before Lamar Jackson, before Kyler Murray still, guys that we have ranked above him. So I'm not taking any Patrick Mahomes, but maybe you're in a league where guys are just so worried about Patrick Mahomes and he starts sliding 6th, 7th round. There he becomes interesting to me, because he's still so talented. He still has Travis Kelce. He still has Juju Smith-Schuster, who's never finished below wide receiver 19 in a full season. They have MBS on the outside. They got Sky Moore. It's not Tyreek Hill, but they have pieces now that can still keep Patrick Mahomes relevant in the passing game. And I think that's something we have to remember, is that QB1 finish is not out of the realm of possibilities for Patrick Mahomes. It's when you're that talented, it can't be. It's just if we had to bet, we'd bet he finishes closer to that 5 than he does 1. But moving on, we have Mr. Jalen Hurts. This has been one of Lucas's favorite players for fantasy football, I should say.
Good clarification.
He can be difficult to watch as an NFL quarterback. Last season, he finished as the QB9, but that's because he missed weeks 13 through 18. And before he had an ankle injury, which kind of bothered him the rest of the year after week 13, he was the quarterback 2 weeks 1 through 12. And a lot of it came in the fourth quarter when they were down. And he was getting garbage time touchdowns. But we can't discount how effective he is on the ground. Ty, this year, Jalen Hurts adds A.J. Brown. What do you think that does for Jalen Hurts, if anything? Do you think it really boosts fantasy impact, or does it kind of keep him around the same where he was last year?
I feel like he kind of keeps him around the same as last year, but post ankle injury, not so much what was before, because it's something that I want to look up, but like rushing quarterbacks, when their team goes and gets a stud wide receiver, does that help benefit their rushing game, right? In like a Jalen Hurts, does it help out his running game, or does it help out the running backs in the running game? That's the big difference, because it seemed like last year teams were willing to just line up right around the line of scrimmage because they knew the ball was they were betting on Jalen Hurts beating them through the air.
Yeah.
Now that you have A.J. Brown, it's going to pull the defense out a little bit more. I don't think that initially benefits Jalen Hurts right away. I'm not saying it, it definitely benefits Jalen Hurts, right? But it helps out guys like Kenny Gainwell and, dare I say, Miles Sanders to a certain extent. But like I feel like it helps the running backs more than it does Jalen Hurts, right? And I can understand why people are so in on Jalen Hurts, because you know what you saw last year. And now he's getting a top wide receiver. So it helps out his passing stats. But I'm not sure where you should be expecting the same rushing stats that we saw last year.
Definitely. He was definitely very touchdown heavy as a runner. Really relied on those touchdowns. The thing about Jalen Hurts, and the reason I know Lucas loves him, is he does have a safe floor, because he does have that rushing upside. Even if it does come down a little bit, it's still a safe floor. He still is, he's probably going to get you 6 to 8 fantasy points a game rushing the ball. The thing that's going to decide whether he can be a top 3 guy or not is, does the accuracy come? Because if you watch that playoff game against Tampa Bay, I don't know if I've seen a pro quarterback miss as many passes as Jalen Hurts did. And so it feels similar for me to Tua's situation, right? They've got enough pieces around him. It's, can he put it together? If we're looking from like a dynasty perspective on Jalen Hurts, I'd be a little worried, because if this year doesn't happen, they might pull the plug and look to the future of, hey, we got picks next year. We could trade up for a Bryce Young, so it'll be really interesting to see how this year goes. I hope that he succeeds. I hope that he kind of takes that step forward. But like you said, we have to be hesitant on Jalen Hurts because he hasn't shown it on the field yet as an NFL quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, I'll use the draft that we had last night as an example, right? I was a stooge and took Lamar in the 3rd, I think. Mm-hmm. Not ideal. And again, it's an 18-person league, so there's a little bit of grace there. But I looked at the other quarterbacks that were on the board still at that point, and Hurts was still there. Herbert was still there, I believe. And the only reason why I took Lamar was because I could get Rashad Bateman and get a stack, right? Mm-hmm. That's really the only reason. But if we're expecting Jalen Hurts to be up there with some of these top 3, top 5 guys, that's a lot to buy into, I personally can't. I don't think you can either. Lucas can. So it feels like, you know what? It actually kind of feels like the Jalen Hurts truthers, I'll call them, right? The guys that had Jalen Hurts last year, they're completely in on him again. So it's really just a rip of the Band-Aid. But you can't just expect Jalen Hurts to be, everything to work out for him. There is some risk with Jalen Hurts, and I don't think the risk is talked about enough.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a great point to bring up. Lucas would be upset that you brought it up, but I think it needs to be brought up. Next guy on our list, number 7, is a guy who feels like he has no risk, and that is Mr. Tom Brady, the ageless wonder. Although in his last press conference, he did look like he was aging a little bit.
Just a tad. Just a tad.
He finished as a QB3 last season at 44. QB1 in weeks 1 through 8. As a guy that doesn't run the ball at all, he was quarterback 1, QB3 in weeks 10 through 18 after his bye. I have him at 7. Lucas has him at 7. You have him at 6. And I'm worried that we're going to be too low on him. I truly am. With how good he is. I'm sorry. I am like watching my hair and it is just distracting me. Because if Chris Godwin comes back healthy in this after, let's say he's healthy week 3, who is going to stop Tom Brady with Chris Godwin, Mike Evans, Julio Jones, Russell Gage, and Leonard Fournette? Who is going to slow that down? Because they didn't slow it down last year. Now you had Julio Jones, you lose Gronk, but I would say right now they're probably pretty similar. And it just feels like we're going to draft him too low, but I could never convince myself to draft him any higher. And he's one of my favorite guys to take because he does drop down to that 8th round sometime, 7 through 9, we'll say, depending on your format, depending on the league. I don't know. Am I wrong in feeling that, or how do you feel about Tom Brady?
I've been thinking about the Bucs a lot lately because Chris Godwin, who knows when he's going to be back? He avoided the PUP list, so realistically, it could be week 1. I shouldn't say realistically because it still doesn't feel like he'll be ready week 1. But again, like you mentioned, all the weapons that he has. But I think the thing that's not being talked about enough is that this offensive line is just completely different.
That's true.
And, you've lost Alex Kappa, Eli Marpet, you know who I'm talking about.
Yep,
he retired, so complete interior is completely new because, Ryan Jensen came back, but he's hurt. Mm-hmm. Now you've got Tristan Wirfs and Donovan Smith, solid tackles, but again, your interior is going to be uber important, and I don't know. I think if there's any reason why Tom Brady finishes outside of the top 5, it's because he's not putting up 43 touchdowns and 5,000 yards because of his offensive line, right?
Yes.
The ball's going to get out quick. Some of the guys on this Buccaneers team are not really yak guys at all. They're really just deep field or downfield guys, or guys that just catch and are immediately on the ground, right? I don't again, the only reason why he doesn't make top 5 again is because if he doesn't throw 40 touchdowns, 5,000 yards, right? Yep. So in some ways, 6 and 7 feels respectable, but that he can finish higher because he has done it before.
Yes.
Right.
Yes. 100%. I don't think there's any more I can add on Tom Brady. So 8 and 9, I think we should talk about together because these are guys that feel interchangeable to me. And I want to see how you feel about that. That's Russell Wilson and Dak Prescott. And the reason I say that is because I think their quarterbacks, Russ had a stretch where he is, but this year I'm not excited per se about drafting Russell Wilson or Dak Prescott. If I'm being honest, I feel the same drafting them as I do taking a Kirk Cousins or Aaron Rodgers later on. However, I know that the upside with these two is much greater than those two. I know that the floor is much greater than those two. Ty, last season, Russell Wilson was obviously a little disappointing with the injury. And now he's in a different situation. What is the ceiling for Russell Wilson this season?
I mean, I'm not going to put it on the same level as Matthew Stafford finishing as a QB5 with Sean McVay, but it kind of has a similar vibe to it, does it not? Right?
Yeah.
Like, I like he's going. I mean, Seattle is pretty advantageous. Oh my goodness, did I just make up a word on the spot? I did.
No, I think advantageous is a word.
Yeah, I just pronounced it wrong. I slipped it up. Anyway, you know what I'm saying. Like, Seattle was pretty favorable, right?
Yes.
Denver's arguably like the better team to be, right? Like, I do we really need to start talking like top 5 upside for Russell Wilson just because you know the quarterback that he is, he has weapons, and you know that like the division that he's in, like it's going to be high scoring games.
Yes.
Like, do we need to start talking top 5 upside with Russell Wilson this year?
It doesn't feel out of the realm of possibilities, that's for sure. Like,
right.
You know, he 100% could finish there. He's got Cortland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy. I mean, they got good running backs. They're going to be moving the ball down the field. They're going to be scoring touchdowns. It's just, you know, the worry I have with Russell Wilson is how much are they going to try and run the ball and just play good defense in Denver, and how much are they actually going to let Russ cook? Now, to be fair, Seattle tried to do that for a long time, and Russell Wilson was still finishing as a top 5 quarterback.
Right.
So it's not out of the realm of possibilities that he does it again. But the rushing upside that he once had is definitely coming down a little bit, I think, especially after the injury. So that is where I worry. But like you said, top 5 is not out of the realm of possibilities. And I kind of feel the same about Dak Prescott. You know, Dak Prescott has had consistent times where he's been a top 3 quarterback. Maybe not finishing, but last season, weeks 9 through 18, he was quarterback 3. Weeks 1 through 6, he was quarterback 9. So we know that he's got tremendous upside, but losing Amari Cooper, not having Michael Gallup back healthy right away, it does worry me a little bit that maybe that upside isn't quite the same this year. But I'm not going to move him outside my top 11. You know, I got him at quarterback 11, and that's as low as I'm willing to go on him, right? I kind of have him at that floor because of that. Do you see anything different with Dak Prescott? Do you see a ceiling I don't? Or do you see, like, think the floor could drop out this year? What are your thoughts on Dak Prescott?
I feel like Dak is a relatively safe floor quarterback more than a high upside quarterback this year. Because there are games where he could go off for like 400 yards, 3 touchdowns, right? But then he could also have games where it's just an absolute stinker and it's like 220 and 2 touchdowns, right? Like, it all evens out to be a relatively safe quarterback to have. But like I said, I feel like he's lost the upside label, and now he is really just a like 8, 9, 10 safe quarterback option. And for whatever reason, he's one of the more, I don't want to say frustrating quarterbacks to rank or to draft, but it feels like he's constantly being taken as a like upside quarterback. When like I said, I think that label has just kind of moved on, and now he's just really just a safe option at quarterback.
Yeah, I do think the only time I've really been drafting Dak Prescott is when I have CeeDee Lamb and I want to make or complete a stack. That's really the only time I've been taking him. As we move down the list, we won't spend too much time on Trey Lance. He's our quarterback 10. Me and you actually have him at 10, and Lucas, who is my guy, has him at 11. So
someone's lying here.
But Lucas did a really good job covering Trey Lance, so I'm not going to kind of beat a dead horse here. And if you really want to listen to it, you can go back to our last Tuesday episode. But he's another guy with a safe floor. If you're going into this year, who do you feel more safe with as your quarterback, Jalen Hurts or Trey Lance as your fantasy quarterback?
I lean Hurts just because we've seen a year of Hurts. But Trey Lance has the same, if not even more, upside than Jalen Hurts from last year.
Yep, I would agree. We're going to move on because I think the most interesting conversation is going to be our honorable mentions, because a lot of people are going to realize we left Joe Burrow off this list. We left Matthew Stafford. We left Aaron Rodgers. You're going to probably be okay that we left Kirk and Derek Carr off the list. But, Ty, is there a quarterback or two that you really want to discuss right now? I'll let you go, and then if I have one I want to talk about after, I'll talk about them. So, floor is yours.
Yeah, it feels like the two guys that people are going to have gripes about not making the top 10, it's Joe Burrow and Stafford. Real quick, for Burrow, Cam, you've got him at 9, I believe. I've got him at 11. Lucas has him at 12. For Stafford, Lucas has him at 10. You and I have Stafford at 12. Let's start with Stafford, because that seems like the more straightforward out of the two at the moment. Stafford finished as a QB5 last year, so getting into a Sean McVay offense really does make a difference. He was a QB6 from weeks 1 to 10, and then QB9 from weeks 12 to 18. He finished QB5 with turnover issues, right? Which feels like going into this year, it's like, well, he's unstoppable, right? Like, if he can turn the ball over as much as he did last year and still finishes a QB5, that bodes pretty well for him. I really think the reason why we have him kind of in that low end QB1 and 12-man drafts is just because it's Matt Stafford. And like, there are guys, again, like Russell Wilson, Dak Prescott, who offer just a hair more rushing upside than Stafford. Then you have guys like Trey Lance and Jalen Hurts, Lamar Jackson, Kyler Murray, who have complete rushing upside, right? And then you got Herbert and Allen and Tom Brady, who could literally throw for like 40 touchdowns a year, right? Like, that's quite literally the only reason why Stafford is not in the top 10. It's just because
100%.
Those other guys. Burrow is where it gets interesting, though. Burrow in weeks 1 through 9 was the QB9. He was averaging 19 fantasy points a game. And then in weeks 11 through 17, he was a QB4, averaging 21 points a game. That includes his 2 games where he popped off for 30-something, high 30s, back-to-back weeks. Here's the thing, though. If you look at, you could call it cherry picking, but if you take out those 2 weeks, you have 1 through 15. He was a QB9. He was averaging 18 fantasy points a game. He only finished, he finished as a QB8 last year, but those 2 finishes where he had 34 and 38 make a world of a difference.
Yes.
You can't expect that every single week. Can it happen? Absolutely. But 34 or 38 can happen to a guy like Kyler Murray. Can happen for a guy like Justin Herbert. Dare I say Tom Brady, right? Like, it's not just Joe Burrow that can do that. So currently he's going off the board as QB7, which feels a little rich, right? Mm-hmm. But I can understand going and getting a Joe Burrow if you're getting a guy like Jamar Chase or T. Higgins as your wide receiver 1. I can understand that. But that's the only scenario that I see it. I'm not reaching for him outside of that scenario.
Mm-hmm. I would agree. And looking at our projections real quick, me and you both have our quarterback 9 through 12 within 5 points of each other. So it's not like Joe Burrow's going to be, they're pretty much the same. It's just the way that the points fell when we were projecting them. With that being said, though, like you said about Burrow, if he's that close, I would rather then take a Dak Prescott or Matthew Stafford at, where I can get him at quarterback 12 instead of reaching at quarterback 7 for a Joe Burrow. Last thing I'm going to touch on is we listed off our next 5 guys of Joe Burrow, Matthew Stafford, Aaron Rodgers, Kirk Cousins, Derek Carr. And I'm going to be honest, Derek Carr doesn't belong in that conversation because he sucks. All right. Now
just need to be said.
Now moving on to tight ends.
Real quick. Here's the last thing on Burrow. Burrow is going 20 picks earlier than Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson. Okay.
That's nuts. That's 2 rounds almost.
That's almost 2 rounds, right? So Joe Burrow is currently going at pick 56. That's like consensus right now. 56 is what, round 6?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's round 6.
Round 5.
Round 5 even. You're getting Dak Prescott and Russell Wilson in the 7th or 8th round with, I mean, a point difference on a per game basis. Like, again, in this scenario of getting a stack with Jamar Chase or T. Higgins, I get it. That's not typically me because I know I can get, a Dak Prescott CeeDee Lamb stack, a Courtland Sutton Russell Wilson stack.
Yes.
Where I can find the value in those quarterbacks later. That's 100%. The last little bit.
No, 100%. That was a great thing to add. We're gonna kind of speed through tight ends a little bit because they're more broken into tiers. I think is kind of the way we should look at them.
I was gonna say, like, no one really cares about tight ends except for like the top 3.
Exactly. And so our top 2 tight ends are Mark Andrews, Travis Kelce. Me and Lucas have Kelce at 1. You have Andrews at 1. I think they're both. I mean, they're easily both worth, I think, a round 2 pick because of their upside. They are guys that can finish, as a top 6 wide receiver. To have that in your tight end spot is huge. But they're the only 2 that should be considered that high for me. I might consider Kelce at the end of round 1, but I haven't been taking him there. If he falls to me at like 203, I'd feel more comfortable taking him. Absolutely. I like Andrews a little more at the end of round 2, but I would definitely feel comfortable taking both of them in the second round. I don't know what you feel about that.
Absolutely. I'm with you.
Yep. Now, as we look at our next tier, me and you have it as 3 guys in the next tier. Lucas adds a 4th, so we'll talk about him in there. It's Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, George Kittle, and Dalton Schultz. I go Pitts, Waller, Kittle, Schultz. You go Kittle, Waller, Pitts, Schultz. And Lucas goes Kittle, Waller, Schultz. Or no. Wow. Pitts, Waller, Schultz, Kittle. Kyle Pitts and George Kittle were screwing me up there.
Too many I's and too many T's.
But this is kind of where I see them all very similar. I see it more as just Pitts, Waller, Kittle. Those 3 I see similar. Those 3 I think you'd be taking round 4. I have Pitts at 3, but I haven't been taking a lot of Pitts because he's going in round 3. But I don't know if he's on Atlanta. Like he is probably the most talented tight end right now, receiving
by
wise.
far. Yeah. Oh yeah.
But you're in Atlanta, so I don't expect you to score a lot of touchdowns. Ty, out of the 3, obviously you have Kittle the highest. Is he the one that you're taking the most out of all 3 of them, or are you taking? How is that working out for you in drafts?
Yeah. So let me start off by explaining the tight ends like this. Because I see Pitts, Waller, Kittle so similar to each other, I'm not taking them where they're going in drafts right now because they're going in that 3, 4, 5 round range. When I shouldn't say can't tell a difference, but when I have a tough time figuring out the differences between these guys, I'm not going to waste the headache in trying to take one of these guys in those rounds. That being said, though, to answer your question, I feel better about Kittle than the other 2 guys. Waller, just because, look,
it's
Devontae Adams.
Yeah.
and look, I'll give a little respect to Hunter Renfrow, even though I think we all agree he's going a little too early in drafts for the scenario. But I feel like if you're in on Renfrow, then you're out on Waller, and if you're in on Waller, then you're out on Renfrow, right? That's how it feels. Personally, I don't really want to deal with the headache of trying to figure out how that's going to work out. But that with Waller, he's such a big target in the red zone, and Derek Carr has such a rapport with Darren Waller that that translates into this year as well. So then you're left with Pitts and Kittle. I just think Kittle is such I don't know why. He's battled injuries, that's one thing. But it feels like he's just not really been utilized a whole lot lately.
Yeah.
I feel like that has to change. I don't know if we call it just the rookie syndrome where they target tight ends a whole lot this year, if that'll happen. But in order for this offense to really kind of, I don't know, maybe the best way to explain it is this. I think the reason why the Niners didn't make it to the Super Bowl last year was because they were missing a Kittle effect in the offense. I will say that with near full confidence. I'm expecting Kittle to bounce back this year because I think he gets more involved this year. Call me a stooge if I'm wrong. You look at the talent of Kittle in the scheme and the offense that he's in, there's really little to no reason why he shouldn't be more of a polarizing figure in that offense. But again, like I said, between Pitts, Waller, and Kittle, I'm really not taking any of them because they are all three of them are just a headache for where they're going in drafts right now.
Yeah, usually when I take one of the three, it's usually Kittle because he's and sometimes Waller. It depends on where you're drafting because one of them falls later than the other three. So if I'm going to take them, I'm going to take whichever one is last. I think the thing about Kittle is he gets penalized in fantasy football because he probably is the best real life tight end for NFL. Because he does so much stuff that's not going to show up on the stat sheet.
Mm-hmm.
And he opens up the field so much because he is such a threat down the middle of the field. And I think that's kind of where it's tough is because he gets doubled a ton. And I think that's why Debo had such a great season is because you have to be concerned at all times about George Kittle. So I still think he's going to be great, but I do think that's kind of, where that disconnect can come in of we know how good he can be, but why is he not producing?
Bingo.
Talking about the next group, we're gonna lump Dalton Schultz in, even though Lucas probably get upset at us for it. So we're gonna go. This will be tight ends 6 through 8. Dalton Schultz, T.J. Hawkinson, and Zach Ertz. So Schultz finishes tight end 3 last season. Hawkinson battled injury and was tight end 15, but Ertz was actually tight end 5 ahead of Pitts last season. Which every time I see it, I'm just like, what? How can Ertz? Because he didn't even play in Arizona the entire season. He was traded halfway through the year, or not quite halfway, a little earlier than halfway, but still, just something that you're not quite expecting. Lucas has Dalton Schultz really high. Tyler, let's try and jump in the mindset of Lucas. Why do we think Lucas has Dalton Schultz so high?
I think it's really because you saw the touchdowns last year, and now Amari Cooper's gone. So in some ways, not only does it open up red zone opportunities, so I should say more red zone opportunities for him, but it opens up the possibility to be more of a figure moving the ball down the field, right? So I totally get it. I'm just not expecting, what do you have, 8 touchdowns last year?
Yeah.
I'm not expecting 8 touchdowns from Dalton Schultz this year.
Yeah, I would agree. That it's just a tough one here. I can grab for you. 8 touchdowns. You only had 800 yards, which is a little bit lower. Like Pitts finished with 1,000, but 2 touchdowns versus 8 touchdowns, that's a big difference. I could see him getting 6 or 7, 8 feels high again. Anything higher than that feels high. I think he's a top 5 tight end if one of the other top 5 are injured. I feel very confident that if those top 5 play an entire season, they are solidified as the top 5 tight ends. And that's just how I feel about that. Next guy on our list is T.J. Hawkinson. Hawkinson, I feel like, has been a guy that we've been so high on for so long as the fans community as a whole. And you just never have gotten it for a full season. It's just, you're just always like, oh, an injury or, just the opportunity wasn't there or something like that. Is this really the season he puts it together with a crowded Lions offense?
I think it depends on just exactly, the status of Jameson Williams, because that is, I think, a factor that scares people. I also think just the DeAndre Swift factor, right? And I guess maybe, actually, you know what? I take back all that. I think the thing is, do teams really believe that the Lions offense is going to be a threat?
That's true.
Amon-Ra we all know what Amon-Ra St. Brown did at the end of last year.
Yeah.
We all know the threat that DeAndre Swift poses. Jameson Williams is going to be a factor when he comes back healthy. So it's really just a matter of how do teams play the Detroit Lions? And in some ways, I think that plays out in favor of Hawkinson, Because in some ways, Hawkinson may be the guy that teams kind of like forget about, right? I mean, it could be Amon-Ra St. Brown as well, but in some, like, again, like Hawkinson can fly under the radar a little bit, and I think the one thing, he finished as a tight end 5 in 2020, and that was like the 1 year where it came together the most. But I feels like TJ Hawkinson is going to fly under the radar when it comes to how teams play the Detroit Lions. That's why I'm in. I shouldn't say I'm in, but yeah, I'm more in on TJ Hawkinson at his ADP than the 3 guys we just talked about and Dalton Schultz.
Yeah. I would agree. I've been trapped in a ton of TJ Hawkinson that he's been falling down the draft board because he is a threat down the field. And tight ends are different than wide receivers. They're utilized different. And I think he's really good at what he does, that if he can be healthy, we could see close to a wide receiver 5 finish for him this season. It's going to come down to, and this is the same thing for every tight end, touchdowns. At the end of the day, it comes down to touchdowns. And then that's something that our next guy, Zach Ertz, kind of saw a lot of last year. Let me check real quick. He had, I guess not a ton, but he had 5 touchdowns. He had 763 yards, 74 receptions. The biggest thing for Ertz is that he played all 17 games. So he only averaged 10 points a game. And that's kind of what we see with tight ends a lot. It's, can you stay healthy? Can you play all 17 games? And can you put up a decent enough 5 to 10 touchdowns? And that's what keeps you relevant. That's what kept Ertz relevant last season. You play all those games, you start catching touchdowns. Obviously, it increased when he went to Arizona, and I think he's going to have an increase at the beginning of the season this year. And so I like where he's going right now because he's going around that tight end 10 spot. He's going close to rounds 10, round 11. And so he's another guy like Hawkinson. If I don't end up taking Hawkinson, I'm taking a lot of Zach Ertz this season.
Yeah. Real quick, as I'm going to stall a little bit because I'm extrapolating TJ Hawkinson's stats last year, and that is a reason why you need to be in on TJ Hawkinson, because the pace that he was on, he would have finished with 86 catches, 120 targets, 800 yards, and 6 touchdowns. That was the pace that he was on before he got hurt. Okay, TJ Hawkinson
last year.
And here's the other thing: TJ Hawkinson, in a point, in a per game basis, was averaging 0.2 points less than Dalton Schultz last year. And in terms of ADP right now, TJ Hawkinson is going a full round and a half later than Dalton Schultz.
It's been crazy to watch that just shift happen throughout the offseason.
Yep. Now to Zach Ertz. Getting to Arizona was a career revolution for him.
Yep.
He's got some rapport to work with now with Kyler. I mean, it's a full off season and whatnot. And I know that a lot of his production came when Kyler was out last year. Mm-hmm. But again, it feels like Zach Ertz is a main contributor in this offense. They just traded for Hollywood Brown. I'm expecting it to be 1A, 1B. Zach Ertz being 1B, Hollywood Brown being 1A. DeAndre Hopkins comes back. I think both of them, they take a step back a little bit. But I think the thing with Ertz, right, you're where you're taking him in drafts right now, you're banking on those first couple of weeks without without DeAndre Hopkins. Mm-hmm. And that's not a bad thing. I mean, you just have to recognize that when DeAndre Hopkins comes back, it's going to be a very different Zach Ertz. So I don't know if you try to flip him, you know, first couple weeks. But again, when you're taking him, you can't really take him with the full guarantee that he's going to be a consistent, starting tight end for you.
For sure. Last 2 guys on our list are Dallas Goddard and Cole Kmet. I actually have Kmet ahead of Goddard. And a lot of that reason just comes from targets. But Dallas Goddard is a guy that people love. And I haven't been taking any of them. And the biggest reason is he's the third option in a team that's not going to throw the ball a lot. Nothing against him as a player. Nothing against his talent. It's the situation that he's in. And we got to remember that situation sometimes matters a lot more than talent in the NFL.
You want to say that a little louder for the people in the back?
Situation sometimes can matter more than talent in fantasy football. You need to know that one. And so that's why Dallas Goddard is a much more talented tight end than Cole Kmet. However, Cole Kmet's in a spot where Justin Fields has Darnell Mooney and no other options. He's going to get the ball because he has to. They're going to be down in every single game. And so that's kind of why I have Goddard at 10, Kmet at 9. And the last thing I want to add, I'll let you talk on either of those guys or whatever you want to say, on tight ends, is everyone after the top 8. Everyone after Ertz. You probably throw Goddard in there. Everyone after Goddard. Complete dart throws at this point. Everyone's like, where's Dawson Knox? Dawson Knox had 45 catches and 9 touchdowns. He's not going to have a 20%, touchdown per reception rate again this season. Guys like Pat Freiermuth benefited greatly from touchdowns. Hunter Henry, touchdowns. Touchdowns are not necessarily a sticky stat, especially in offenses like Buffalo, offenses like the Steelers. Maybe you could say New England, but they have a new offensive coordinator, so you can't even say New England. So touchdowns are not a sticky stat. So if a guy relied on touchdowns last season, you can't count on him to be a top tight end again this year.
Bingo. Yeah, I think with Goddard, we saw a career high in yards, and I'm pretty sure he led all tight ends. He was second because Kyle Pitts had 1,000. Goddard was second in yards, and he was second. I mean, career high in yards per reception. There has to be some sort of penalty, I'll call it, for going and getting a guy like A.J. Brown.
Yes.
There has to be a penalty for a year 2 Devonte Smith, right? And it boggles my mind that it seems like people forget about Devonte Smith when it comes to Philly. Everyone immediately goes, oh, yeah, Jalen Hurts and A.J. Brown, Dallas Goddard. Oh, whoa. Devonte Smith would like to say something about that.
Yes, 100%.
I get that a tight end, I mean, again, that's why Goddard is like that first tight end in the dart throw category. Because, again, no one knows how that offense is going to be run. We're going to bank on the fact that Devonte Smith was a Heisman Trophy winner. It was coming out as the most perennial weapon in the draft 2 years ago.
Yeah, I 100% can't agree more.
And then Cole Kmet. Let's see. Where did he finish in targets?
Machine.
He had 93 targets and 60 catches. That is fair value or fair statistical finishes for tight ends. No more Allen Robinson. Steady QB situation now, finally. I'm not going to say it's going to be good quarterback play, but it's steady. New coach that is looking for just anyone to contribute.
Yep.
And no Jimmy Graham. That's the other part.
Mm-hmm.
Cole Kmet has the opportunity and situation that we have not really seen out of a lot of tight ends recently.
Yeah, if you give Kmet 6 touchdowns last season, all of a sudden he moves up into a top 10 tight end. So that's not out of the realm of possibilities. But I am expecting this year that his targets go up. I only have him projected for 4.5 touchdowns. So it's not like I'm giving him a crazy amount of touchdowns. But he's going to score. He has to score as their only tight end. I
mean, he scored 0 last year.
So it can only go up. Same with, that's how we feel about Kyle Pitts too. So, all right. With that, I think we'll wrap it up. Remember, follow us on TikTok, Fantasy Football Fellas, Twitter, FFF Fellas, Instagram, the FF Fellas, and YouTube, Fantasy Football Fellas. Find us on Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at. Thanks again for tuning in. We had a ton of fun talking about quarterbacks, tight ends, ready for all those drafts to be coming in. Hope you're getting excited. This is the best time of the year in fantasy football. Tyler, do you have anything for the people before they kick off their drafts.
I sure do. Come join us over on Underdog. Come play fantasy football with us. I mean, the clock is winding down until the start of the season. Make the most of it. Come play fantasy football with us. Come beat us if you want. Don't think it'll happen, but I mean,
you can try.
You can try. Come join us over on our new what do we want to call it? Yeah, our new community over on Chalkboard.
There you go.
Chalkboard is just like Discord, except it's just sports, right? Like there and look, we have a brand new channel. I'll call it a channel. I'll call it a page in our Fantasy Football Fellas channel over on Chalkboard called Team Reviews. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to send in your team for a little review, you can do that. And guess what? We'll go live on TikTok.
Yes,
we'll review your team. So if you want to be featured in a TikTok live of the Fantasy Football Fellas where we review your team, come join us over on Chalkboard. Drop your team in the team review, the amount of people in your league, the format, everything, all that stuff. We'll review it on a TikTok live where we have a bunch of people watching. So if you want to be one of the cool kids, come join us over on Chalkboard. Third thing, and certainly not least, you mentioned it. It's draft season right now. Go purchase the Fantasy Football Fellas draft guide. You get all three of us fellas, Lucas, Cam, and Tyler. You get all of our projections, all of our rankings for each position in fantasy football, except for defense and kickers. They matter, but just not in fantasy football, okay? But yeah, again, you get all three of ours in the same draft kit. $5. Venmo.
Yes, sir.
PayPal. Cash App. Draft season. Invest your money wisely in a nice draft guide. Consider the Fantasy Football Fellas draft guide.
There you go. I couldn't have said it better myself. And with that, deuces. And we'll see you next week.
Deuces.